inside the hospitals that concealed the Russian casualties. Vilnius, Lithuania. As his daughters dozed up in the backseat, his wife filmed him driving, eyes narrowed, focused on the dark road ahead. Andrei, a doctor, had been plotting their escape from Belarus since 2020, when the Kremlin-backed regime cracked down on the popular uprising, sending the country spiraling deeper into authoritarian rule and engulfing it into in a climate of fear. When Russia launched its assault on Ukraine from Belarus' southern doorstep, getting out suddenly felt more urgent. His family watches from the windows of their apartment block as helicopters and missiles thundered through the sky. Within days, Andrei, whose name has been changed for his safety, said he found himself being forced to treat Russian soldiers injured in Moscow's botched assault on the Ukrainian capital Kiev. Then, at the end of the March, he was jailed on trumped up corruption charges. After his release in May and carefully weighing the risk, he decided it was time to leave. So, as not to spark any suspicion, Andrei asked one of their neighbors to sneak the family's suitcases filled with legal documents, a few clothes, and a photo album out of their building and stash them in the car. Late one Friday evening in August, after he had finished his shift at the hospital, they met in the parking lot without any security cameras to pick up their bags. Then the family set up. It had taken Andre months to chart out the best route, asking for the advice over encrypted messaging apps from a Belarusian medical solidarity group, activist organizations, and others living in exile. Driving through the night, they traveled from their home in Mazir, a city in Belarus, southern Gomel region, more than 370 miles north to the country's border with Lithuania. Finally, finally reaching the point where he had been told he could cross. They stopped on a ruler dirt road and Andre kissed his wife and girls goodbye. All being well, they would cross through the official border checkpoint and reunited with him in Lithuania, where he planned to claim asylum. Inside one of his daughter's toys, Andre had hidden a USB flash drive carrying evidence of what he had witnessed. Dozens of x rays of wounded Russian soldiers. He told them he loved them, turned it, and walked into the woods. As Andre made his way through tangled undergrowth, disoriented, he came across the Belarusian border police booth and felt a sense of terror. He knew his name was on a government list of people banned from leaving the country, and if his passport information was checked, he would be thrown back in prison. Mercifully, the booth was empty, and when he reached the river bank, he swam as quickly as he could, his heart racing. On the other side, Andrei recalled a heavy-set Lithuanian man stood holding a fishing pole, his eyes wide. Speaking in Russian, he said it was the first time he would seen someone fleeing. Is it real so bad in Belarus? The man asked. Yes, Andrei answered, thinking back over all that Belarusians had endured all the hands of his country's brutal regime, and now the bloody war they had been drawn into. It is. The Belarusian president Alexander Lukashenko allowed his close ally Russia in February to use the country, which shared a 674-mile border with Ukraine as the staging ground for each invasion. With his permission, Russian President Vladimir Putin treated Belarus as the extension of Moscow's territory, sending equipment and around 30,000 troops ostensibly for joint military exercises, the biggest deployment to the former Soviet state since the end of the Cold War. Russia erected temporary camps and hospitals in Belarus frozen fields, dispatching military hardware, artillery, helicopters, and fighter jets near the border. Belarusian of Russian forces are performing live fire exercises in Belarus near the Ukrainian border on February 17, a week before the war began. Belarusian Military of Defense (CNN) poll. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko reaffirms his support for Russia on February 17, saying the two countries have practically formed the United Army. Belarusian Ministry of Defense (CNN) poll. When Putin declared his special military operation in the pre-dawn televised address on February 24, he sent missiles, paratroopers, and a huge armored column of soldiers rolling south from Belarusian soil, setting in motion what was intended to be a lightning strike to decapitate the government in Kiev. But as Russia's advance stalled and setbacks mounted, Moscow began to spirit wounded soldiers back across the border to Belarus for treatment in several civilian hospitals. A CNN investigation has revealed the doctors working there were drafted into a war that they didn't sign up for, unwittingly enlisted as quasi-combat medics and obliged by their Hippocratic oath to provide life-saving care. Many were forced to sign non-disclosure agreement, told not to speak about what they saw. Some, like Andrei, later fled from their operator tables. Belarusian medical workers gained perhaps the clearest sense of the scale of casualties suffered by Russia in the early weeks of the war, describing young shell-shocked soldiers who thought they were being sent for exercises only to find themselves losing a limb in a war they were ill prepared to fight. While Lukashenko admitted that Belarus was providing medical aid to Russian military personnel, little is known about what happened in the hospitals where they were taken, which were kept under strict surveillance. In interviews with Belarusian doctors, members of the country's medical diaspora, human rights activists, military analysts, and security sources, CNN examined the role Belarus played in the treating Russian casualties, while the Kremlin sought to conceal them. Their testimonies and the documentation, including medical records, offer insight into the Belarusian government's complicity in the Ukraine war, as fears mount that the country might be sucked further into the fight. Exactly how many Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in Ukraine remains a mystery to all but a few inside the Kremlin. The Russian Defense Ministry said on March 2nd that only casualties amounted to 498 Russian soldiers killed and nearly 1,600 injured in action. But US and NATO estimates around the same time put the number of deaths significantly higher, between 3,000 and 10,000. 7 months into the war, Russia's defense ministry Sergei Shoigu revised the official tally, saying nearly 6,000 Russian soldiers had died. The Pentagon said in August that it believed the true toll was much more, as many as 80,000 deaths or wounded. Belarus' strong stranglehold on information. Lukashenko's regime has put independent news media under severe pressure, restricted free speech, and introduced new registration extending the death penalty for attempts to carry out acts of terrorism, has provided the usual cover for Russia in repressing details about each injured and death. In recent months, a number of people have been arrested for filming Russian military vehicles, include across according to Piasna, a Belarusian human rights organization whose imprisoned founder was recently awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. In spite of the repressive environment, hints of Moscow's troops' ruses have emerged on social media and local report. In late February, the Belarusian Hazun Project, an activist monitoring group that tracks military activity in the country, started sharing images on Telegram of Russian medical vehicles ferrying fighters across the border from the front line. Drawing on the network of trusted local sources, the group posted footage of green Soviet era PAZ buses marked with red crosses and the white letter V, a symbol believed to stand for Vostok or East, and armored ambulances in Gomel region. It appeared some were being taken to field hospitals, which had pumped, pumped up near Belarus border with Ukraine. February 22nd, at VD Bolshoi Bokov airfield, Maxar Technologies identified a deployment of dozens of military vehicles, troop tent, and field hospital set up at the old Belarusian airdrome near Mazir. March 14, in Narulia, another field hospital, a larger grouping of big tent, was detected in the town of Narulia, closer to the Ukrainian border. Other medical vehicles were spotted near hospitals in the cities of Gomel and Mazir. February 23rd, 3. Near Mazir City Hospital, a photo shared on the eve of the invasion captured an armored ambulance outside Mazir City Hospital. February 28, near Mazir, days later, a column of several medical PAZ buses were filmed driving on a local road. February 28, at Mazir railway station, one video showed men in fatigues outside Mazir's main railway station appearing to carry wounded soldiers onto a train marked with the red RZD logo of the Russian state-owned operator Russian Railways. We can confirm that Russians used the Belarusian infrastructure, including medical buildings and field hospitals. They also used the morgues, and they used the train stations or air bases to transport dead people or injured people. We have photos of that. Anton Motorko, a Belarusian blogger who fled Minsk in 2020 and founded the Belarusian Hazun Project, told CNN. Motorko said his sources told him that morgues in the area were overflowing, and that a steady stream of wounded soldiers had arrived at Mazir City Hospital, where Andrei worked. In mid-February, Andrei watched in horror as his hometown of Mazir seemingly turned into a spiraling military base. Armored tanks rolled down the street. Russian soldiers roamed local shops and got drunk at bars downtown. he and his family no longer felt safe and avoided being outside after dark. Soon they began to suspect that Russia was preparing for war, as the military drills were due to the wrap up on February 20. Andrei said his hospital administration extended the directive to treat Russian soldiers free of charge until March 10th. They must have thought the war would end by then, Andrei said, adding that 2 days later, Russian officers from the field hospital outside Mazir cleaned out the city's blood bank reserves. On the morning of February 24th, the first day of fighting, Andrei recalled a hospital officer gathering all of the doctors into the meeting room, ordering them to keep 250 beds free for Russian casualties, stop all planned surgeries, and send what Belarusian patients they could home. Then they warned us that they were not allowed to share any information about Russian soldiers. They had to sign a non disclosure form forbidding us to share any photos, documents. Andrei said they told us that they were being watched by the Russian Federal Security Services, called FSB, that they had ways of monitoring our phones, while he didn't see any Russian FSB. Andrei said they did notice a local Belarusian State Security Committee, called KGB, agent stalking the halls of the hospital. CNN has reached out to Mazir City Hospital for comment. They warned us that they were not allowed to share any information about Russian soldiers. They had to sign a non-disclosure form forbidding us to share any photos, documents. Andrei, a doctor from Mazir, Belarus. Alexander Azarov, head of BIPO, an organization set up by ex-Belarusian police and security service members, told CNN that Mazir authorities went to great length to keep information about the number of wounded Russian soldiers and the types of injuries they sustained under wraps. Raza Rao said that the KGB Department for Mazir, along with the region's Department of Internal Affairs, put Mazir City Hospital under round-the-clock surveillance while warning the staff of personnel's responsibility for disclosing information about military personnel undergoing treatment in the hospital. Still, Andrei manages to secretly photocopy the x-rays of dozens of troops treated at Mazir City Hospital, which he shared with CNN. What I took with me, that part of the archive, could have could have gotten me into legal trouble for espionage, he said, adding that he had taken the risk to provide evidence of a side of the world that has so far gone unseen, smuggling them out of Belarus in his daughter's toy cell phone. The scans included the names and ages of soldiers, many of whom were between 19 and 21 years old, capturing their injuries in stark black and white. Andrei said he saw the biggest wave of casualties arrive in Mazir Hospital en masse in the early hours of the February 28th. After receiving a call that the soldiers were incoming, the soldiers assembled at the entrance to the emergency room around midnight, waiting. Soon, bus rows of injured troops began to pull in. Russian soldiers carted them inside the stretchers, dumping them at the front doors, Andrei said. The doctors quickly assessed the soldiers' injuries, drawing numbers on their foreheads to mark them by priority. Try, try, triaging their wounds and sending them up for scans or injuries, surgeries. Altogether, more than 100 Russian troops arrived with injured to the face, gaping wounds, confounded fractures from explosions, and coming under fire, Andrei said. On the same day, a local state-run TV channel released the report claiming the hospital was running normally, which Andrei said he saw as the attempt to stymie rumors that it was treating Russian troops. In reality, the hospital was full of soldiers, Andrei said. Some were missing eyes, others required ampu- amputations, having arrived with gangrenous, shattered limbs. A few were paralyzed, one that lost part of his brain, another his lower jaw. Several had been wearing tourniquets for days to staunch the blood, their bodies pampered with bullets and shrap- shrapnel, the x-rays showed. They were more wounded, in need of the operation, than we had operating tables, Andrei said. The Russians just gave us their injured soldiers and didn't give a damn about them. Many of the Russians had been fighting in areas outside of Kiev, in Hostomel, where they suffered major losses at the key airfield, in Bucha and Borodyanska, Borodyanka, suburbs that they terrorized for weeks, and in Chernobyl, where their forces are exposed to radiation in the highly toxic zone known as the Red Forest. Andrei said he treated Russian paratroopers and special forces injured in the botched assault on Hostomel airfield, where they told him their helicopter came under attack. They were professional killers. They had to treat them. Then was our job. I felt disgusted by the whole thing, but as a doctor, I am not really allowed to feel disgust, he said. Russia's Major General Sergei Mirakov, who suffered a severe abdominal injury in Chernobyl, was also treated at Mazir Hospital, according to his X-ray, which was among those Andrei smuggled out. But majority of the injured were young, unexperienced soldiers and conscripts from remote part of Russia, Andrei said. CNN has reached out to the Russian Ministry of Defense about these allegations as well as accusations it has co-opted Belarus to carry out an act of aggression against Ukraine in violation of international law. On March 1st, at the meeting of Belarus Security Council, Lukashenko acknowledged that hospitals were providing Russian soldiers with life-saving treatment. We treat them and will continue treating these guys in Gomel, Manzir, and I think in some other district capital when they are transported to us. What's wrong with that? Injured people have always received medical treatment during any war, he said before dismissing report that Russia had suffered huge losses as fake news. Our self-exiled opposition and the rest shout about thousands of injured Russian military personnel delivered to Gamal. Nothing like that. We've treated about 160 to 170 injured in this entire period, Lukashenko added. But Andrei and the other medical professionals in the region tell a different story. In early March, 40 to 50 Russian casualties were brought to Mazir City Hospital every day, shuttled in and out again, like a conveyor belt, Andrei said. Most arrived in the dark of night or early in the morning in green Russian military buses and ambulances. The doctors at the hospital, thought that maybe they were worried about security, so they brought them under the cover of the night. They were afraid of the road traffic to see the red cross on their vehicles. People would know, Andrei said. The Russians also tried to bring the deaths to the hospital, he said, adding they didn't know what to do with them. Andrei secretly photographed the bullet he said he removed from the Russian soldier's neck on March 8th. Anna Krasulina, spokeswoman for exiled Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tishikanovskaya, told the Ukrainian parliamentary TV channel Rada in March that the morgues in Manzir were flooded with the bodies of dead Russian soldiers. In April, Tishikanovskaya met with members of the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C., handing over evidence of Lukashenko's involvement in the war in Ukraine. The document seen by CNN detail how Belarus provided key infrastructure to Russia, including missile launch positions, railway lines, and medical assistance. Citing open source report information, Flanak Piakorka Tishikanovskaya's chief political advisor told CNN that Russians were using hospitals in both the Gomel and Brest regions between the start of the war and April, but that there were also many cases when doctors refused to take Russian soldiers, describing this as grassroots resistance. He added that Russians have not been using infrastructure like hospitals in Belarus since April. They were more wounded in need of operation than we had operating tables. Andrei. Manzir was one of the at least three hospitals in Gomel region that treated Russian casualties, according to medical and security sources who estimate that the facilities collectively cared for hundreds of soldiers. Mikalai, a doctor who left the region and whose name has also been changed for his safety, said that the regional clinical hospital and the Republican Research Center for Radiation Medicine and Human Ecology were among those providing treatment, but that the latter was largely operating with Russian medical staff brought in for the war. After receiving a patient transferred from the Republican Research Center for Radiation Medicine and Human Ecology, Mikolai said that he had been curious about how the hospital was operating. So late one night, he drove slowly past the complex. I saw where it started getting dark. Military medical buses coming to the hospital, green colored PAZ vehicles with their windows covered with a white cloth, he said. Azarov, the head of the BIPOL, said that the Republican Research Center for Radiation Medicine and Human Ecology was used to treat Russian servicemen who took part in the assault on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, some of whom showed signs of radiation poisoning. The hospital was originally built in the early 1990s to provide specialized medical care to the local population affected by the Chernobyl disaster. Nikolai said it was no surprise that the Belarusian and Russian authorities went to great lengths to keep the reality of what was happening behind the closed doors in these hospitals a secret. A great number of wounded young soldiers is dirty stain that does not correlate with the idea of this great Russian invasion, he said, adding that the authorities wanted to give the impression that the situation was under control and the report of the huge number of casualties were fake. But this is the bad truth. They tried to hide it. Unpicking the role that Belarus had played in the in the Ukraine war had taken a new urgency since Lukashenko announced in October that Russian soldiers would deploy to the country to form a new regional grouping and carry out joint exercises with the Belarusian troops, raising fears that he might draw the country more directly into the conflict. The fact is that Belarus long ago ceded its sovereignty in significant ways to Russia. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said in a briefing on October 12th, responding to a question about Belarus posturing, which the United States is monitoring closely. The fact that President Putin had been able to use what should be sovereign Belarusian territory as the staging ground, the fact that brutal attacks against the people of Ukraine have emanated emanated from the sovereign third country, Belarus in this case. It is another testament to the fact that the Lukashenko regime does not have the best interest of its people at heart. Not only has Russia infringed on Belarus' sovereignty, it had also posed a serious challenge to NATO. Three members of the alliance shared a border with Belarus. Putin had been laying the groundwork to transform Belarus into a vassal state for some time. After a rigged presidential election in 2020 cemented Lukashenko's long reign, triggering widespread pro-democratic protest. He clung to power with the help of Putin. Russia backed the ruthless crackdown on demonstrations and gave Belarus a $1.5 billion lifeline to evade the brunt of sanctions. But it came with the strings attached. Beholden to the Kremlin, Lukashenko has supported Russia's military actions from the sidelines, so far avoiding sending his own troops into the fray. But he may be forced to shift his position as Putin racked up losses. As far as our participation in the special military operation in Ukraine is concerned, we are participating in it. We do not hide it, but we are not killing anyone. Lukashenko said in early October, we offer medical aid to people. We treat people if necessary, he added. Still, many in Belarus are terrified that might change. A majority of Belarusians do not want their country to take part in the war, according to the recent Chatham House poll conducted online, which found that only 5% favored sending troops to support Russia. Andrei Strizak, a Belarusian human rights activist and the founder of PSOL, an initiative that supports victims of political persecution in Belarus, who himself faces politically motivated charges for funding extremist formations, said that the organization saw a surge in requests for help when the invasion started. The group set up the Telegram channel with advice on how to flee abroad for people who don't support the war or were afraid of being mobilized themselves. We took more than 10,000 consultations, and now we have a Telegram channel with 30,000 subscribers, Strizak said, adding it's very intensive work for us. Andrei reached out to the PSOL for help getting out the country, but in late August, with the borders to Ukraine and Russia largely impassable, we were unable to assist him. In the end, he was aided by the informal network of Belarusian dis- dis- dissidents living in exile in Lithuania who identified the potential crossing point. They said they too have seen a surge in the number of Belarusian men fleeing for fear they will be forced to fight in Ukraine. Having seen the havoc that the war has wrought, wrought firsthand, Andrei said he was concerned that he might be sent into Ukraine as the combat medic. In Russia, doctors are increasingly coming under pressure. Earlier this month, Russian state-run news agency TASS reported the physicians in St. Petersburg received the letters from authorities telling them not to leave the country for security reasons, and Russia's parliament said around 3,000 doctors could be called up as part of Putin's partial mobilization as of troops. In late March, Andrei was arrested alongside dozens of other Belarusian doctors, many of whom specialized in surgery, on charges of corruption and receiving bribes, which he denies. After being jailed in the Belarusian capital Minsk for a month and a half, Andrei said he got the sense that their detention may have been an intimidation tactic to make them think twice before leaving the country. When he was released, he said he was contacted by his local military branch and told to enlist in the army. I was asked to come to the military enlistment office with my document. Of course, I didn't go there. Andre said he fled the country shortly after. Now settled in another European country with his family, Andre is relieved to no longer be wondering when or if he might be sent to war. Instead, he is focused on sitting national medical exams so they can start to practice again in his new home. Ukraine is very dear to me. I was worried about my close friends and families living there, he said, adding that Belarus' complicity in the war was unbearable. We, we wrote to each other Slava Ukraini, saying that Ukraine was going to win. My relatives said that we would all outlive all of this, and yet two bombs are being launched at them from the territory where I live.